Education has always been a top concern for both individuals and society. As the world progresses, school violence has become more complex and widespread. It's no longer limited to students using harsh, offensive words to insult others. Worse, physical violence is now being used to express personal grudges, disagreements, and in some cases, has even escalated to life-threatening situations. In this case, we want to explore a darker side of school violence. Being in an educational environment does not guarantee civilized behavior. In fact, the more developed a place is, the more sophisticated the acts of violence become, with far more serious consequences for society. Through this case, we hope you'll reflect and take away important lessons for yourself. Hello, and welcome to my channel. Chongqing is a major tourist city in China, located at the upper reaches of the Yangtze River, right at the confluence of the Yangtze and Jialing rivers. This location brings a breath of fresh nature to the city. During the day, Chongqing dazzles visitors with its bustling streets filled with eateries, handicraft shops, and vibrant marketplaces. But as night falls, people are even more amazed by the mystical glow of this spiritual land. For tourists and shopping or food enthusiasts, Chongqing truly feels like paradise. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the glamorous surface lies a dark reality that few dare to explore: theft, violent crimes, and social evils. Where there are crowds, trouble is bound to follow. At the Chongqing police station, on the morning of August 23, 2011, an emergency call was received. The report was about a discovery at a small branch of the Yangtze River within Chongqing City. While cleaning along the riverbanks, a sanitation worker stumbled upon the body of a naked man, completely unclothed. Even more disturbing, the body had been mutilated, the genitals were severed. This was the first time police encountered such a brutal case, suggesting the perpetrator was extremely cruel. Clearly, there were many dark secrets behind this crime waiting to be uncovered. Police quickly arrived at the scene to investigate. The area was relatively secluded, with few passers-by, occasionally used by locals for fishing. The stretch of river where the body was dumped flows toward a nearby residential area. If not for getting caught in some branches, the body would have drifted straight into the neighborhood, exposing many people to the horrifying sight. Was this the killer's true intention? Interestingly, the body showed no signs of sinking. When retrieved, the victim's body was stiff from prolonged immersion, swollen, skin turned purplish, lips blackened, covered in numerous wounds. The corpse looked truly terrifying. The police conducted an autopsy to determine the cause and time of death. The forensic report indicated the victim had died on the night of August 21st. However, due to the prolonged immersion in water, pinpointing the exact time of death was difficult. Beyond the visible signs of assault, the victim had deep cuts around the wrists, ankles, and thighs. These cuts did not appear to be from a sharp blade, but rather resembled injuries caused by strong ligatures cutting into the skin. The investigators suspected the use of fishing lines or plastic zip ties wrapped tightly around the limbs. The depth of the wounds suggested that the victim had struggled intensely during the torture, causing the lines to dig deeper into the flesh. The primary cause of death was determined to be severe blood loss from the mutilation of the genital area. The forensic team believed the attacker had inflicted multiple blows to this area as a form of torture. As evidenced by the numerous clean-cut marks around the wound, it appeared the perpetrator had brutally hacked at the body part, reducing it to shreds. While the victim's upper body was relatively clean despite the injuries, both feet were coated with a thin layer of light brown mud. Blood tests also revealed traces of sedatives, suggesting the perpetrator had drugged the victim to facilitate the attack. Forensic experts suspected that before the victim died, he had been subjected to extreme torture while completely naked. The crime scene was likely outdoors, on damp soil, which explained the dirt on his bare feet from prolonged contact with the ground. Though lifeless, the victim's face was haunting. His eyes were wide open, staring upward, mouth slightly agape, facial muscles tensed. These expressions indicated a sudden death, with the body reacting in shock during the final moments of life. In the brief window between life and death, The victim's body underwent involuntary reflexes, eyes snapping open, muscles contracting, capturing a terrifying look of surprise and pain. The forensic team concluded that the perpetrator had fully stripped the victim, likely restraining him to a chair before proceeding with the torture. The mutilation of the genital area was done while the victim was still conscious. No one could possibly endure such excruciating pain while awake. Thus, when the attacker delivered the fatal blow, severing the genitalia, the victim succumbed to the agony and passed away. Summarizing the investigation results, the police concluded that there must have been a specific reason for the perpetrator to commit such a brutal act against the victim. If there was no personal conflict between them, then the suspect was clearly a dangerously deranged individual with severe psychological issues. Failing to identify the culprit in time could very likely lead to more victims. While the forensic team continued examining the body, another police unit was assigned to search both sides of the river upstream for clues. The logic was that when the perpetrator dumped the body into the river, they must have left traces behind. After nearly a full day of searching, about 5 kilometers upstream from where the body was found, the team discovered a suspicious spot, which was highly likely to be the crime scene. It took considerable time to locate the area because, although it was just a meter from the riverbank, it was surrounded by overgrown weeds taller than an average person. In the middle of this dense growth, a circular clearing had been made, about 2 meters in diameter. At this location, the search team found numerous pieces of fishing line, each about 30 centimeters long, some stained with blood. The ground was covered with shoe prints, but the patterns were too worn to identify. Interestingly, each footprint had a horizontal crack in the sole, suggesting the suspect's shoes were so old that the soles had split. Additionally, the police discovered 4 indentations resembling the marks left by a chair's legs. 2 of these indentations were surrounded by many footprints. Blood samples from the fishing lines and shoe prints were collected and later confirmed to match the victim's DNA. This area was officially designated as the crime scene. Nearby, in a bush close to the site, police found a high school uniform. On the shirt was a name tag that read Li Huangnan, Class 11A3. Next to it was a pair of blue Air Jordan 1 high sneakers. An officer from the investigation team noted that this particular sneaker model was a limited edition release from Nike, with a starting price exceeding 15,000 yuan. While the uniform was still relatively clean and intact, the sneakers were badly damaged, cut into shreds. This discovery led police to suspect that Li Huangnan might be the victim's identity. An investigation into his background revealed that Li Huangnan was 17 years old and a student at a well-known high school in Chongqing. At school, he was known as the leader of a group of 6 male students who referred to him as their boss. This group frequently caused trouble and took pleasure in bullying other students. Their usual targets were shy and timid classmates who, after being threatened, never dared to report the abuse. The school principal admitted that while there had been rumors of bullying, the school had never received any formal complaints. Because of this, the school believed the situation was not serious and considered it had been properly handled. However, a teacher, who requested to remain anonymous, told the police that about 2 weeks ago, the school had received a complaint. Yet, it was dismissed due to a lack of concrete evidence against Wang Nan's violent behavior. In fact, the school's management even reprimanded the complaining students' parents for allegedly spreading false rumors that could tarnish the school's reputation. This response left some teachers upset, but they remained silent out of fear of losing their jobs. When the police tried to trace the identities of those who had filed the complaint, they found no leads. Investigators suspected that the school had intentionally erased all related records to protect its image, or someone with influence had interfered to suppress the matter. If the teacher's statement was accurate, there was a chance that the victim's family, after being ignored by the school, had reported the incident to the local police instead. Not wanting to overlook any clues, the police reviewed all complaints received over the past 2 weeks regarding the expensive sneakers found at the scene. Inquiries with Huang Nan's classmates revealed that he had stolen them from a fellow student named Dan Huan. Dan Huan was known to be extremely shy, but well-liked for his academic excellence and gentle personality. Coming from a wealthy family, he was often targeted. In contrast, little was known about Huang Nan's background. No one in the class was sure if his family was rich or poor. What was certain was that Huang Nan had been admitted to the school through a personal connection. Normally, only students from affluent families or those with outstanding academic achievements and scholarship could enroll. When police contacted Huang Nan's family, his parents confirmed that their son had been missing for several days. However, since Huang Nan had a habit of running away from home, his family had grown used to his absences and did not seem overly concerned. The police collected a DNA sample from Huang Nan's mother for comparison. The results showed a 99.999% match, confirming the victim's identity as Li Huang Nan. Throughout their communication with the family, the police never encountered Huang Nan's father. When asked about his whereabouts, his mother explained that he was currently working abroad. The family's financial situation was modest, with his mother being a homemaker. Given Huang Nan's history of bullying and making enemies, the police found it difficult to narrow down potential suspects. However, based on the condition of the retrieved body, it was evident that the perpetrator harbored an intense personal grudge against the victim. However, all the information gathered by the police pointed to Dan Wan as the student who had been frequently bullied by Huang Nan. Moreover, the expensive sneakers Huang Nan had stolen from Dan Wan were found by the police in a completely destroyed state, raising further suspicions about Dan Wan's involvement. Could these very sneakers have been the trigger for Dan Wan's deep-seated resentment, pushing him to meticulously plan the murder of the person who had repeatedly humiliated him? Despite being known for his gentle, quiet nature, Dan Wan was not beyond suspicion. After all, even the most patient creature reacts when pushed too far. The police launched a full investigation into Dan Wan, focusing particularly on his whereabouts between August 17th and August 23rd. Through interviews with classmates and further inquiry, police learned that Dan Wan came from a wealthy family, but lacked emotional support. His mother had passed away when he was 16, and his father, though financially supportive, was emotionally distant. Interestingly, Huang Nan had once been Dan Wan's close friend. They often hung out together, with Huang Nan showing what seemed to be genuine care, almost as if they were a couple. This attention led Dan Wan to develop real feelings for him, eventually considering a confession. However, he soon discovered that Huang Nan's interest was part of a cruel bet with friends, a wager to prove that Dan Wan was gay, with the goal of seducing him only to later abandon him. News of this bet quickly spread, sparking rumors and gossip about the group's shameless behavior. To protect his own reputation, Huang Nan flipped the story, claiming it was Dan Wan who had pursued him, while he himself despised people of the LGBTQ community. From then on, Huang Nan openly bullied Dan Wan at every opportunity. Given this history, the police recognized that Dan Wan had a clear motive. Being deceived in such a heartless way, coupled with repeated public humiliation, could easily have planted a deep grudge within him. Over time, the emotional burden would have intensified, pushing him toward a breaking point. However, despite these logical assumptions, the investigation revealed a completely different picture. Dan Wan had shown no unusual behavior in recent days. Surveillance footage clearly documented his movements. If he wasn't at home, he was at school or the library. Home security cameras and school CCTV both confirmed his whereabouts in detail. Even his transportation was accounted for, as he always used his family's car. The in-car camera also verified his presence, with no evidence of him using any other means of travel. All clues indicated that Dan Wan had not left the house or school premises, except for one window of time. On the afternoon of August 21st, between 4 o'clock and 5 p.m., his driver had taken him to a riverside park near the site where the body was found. There, he simply rode his bicycle, although the park was close to the crime scene. Dan Wan had only spent about 30 minutes riding his bike. It was impossible for him to have committed the murder within such a short time. So, who was the real killer? The police decided to expand their investigation, tracking Huang Nan's movements on August 21st. Starting from the school area, a security camera at the gymnasium captured footage of Huang Nan climbing over the school wall to sneak out at 9 a.m. Cameras from houses across the street also recorded him heading to a nearby convenience store at 9:10. Strangely, no footage showed him leaving. The store had only one entrance, so there was no back door he could have used. From that moment on, Huang Nan's trail vanished. However, at 9:50 a.m., a man wearing a mask and covering himself tightly was seen pushing a large box out of the store. He loaded it onto a tricycle cart and left. The cart already had a wooden chair secured on it. Throughout that day, only that box was large enough to conceal an adult male, making it the prime object of suspicion. Tricycle carts of this design were common in the city, and the vehicle's license plate had been removed, making identification difficult. Nonetheless, by analyzing street surveillance footage, the police traced the cart's route, which led straight to the area where the crime scene was later discovered. With this crucial clue, the police became increasingly certain that the masked man was the perpetrator. Investigating the convenience store further, internal security footage showed that this man had slipped into the storage room at the back of the store around 8:30 a.m., taking advantage of a moment when the staff wasn't paying attention. At 9:15, Huang Nan approached the storage room, glanced around, and stepped inside. At 9:40, the masked man was seen pushing the large box out of the store. From that point on, there was no footage of Huang Nan exiting the storage room, confirming the suspicion that he had been kidnapped, sedated, and hidden inside that box. When questioned about the storage room and the mysterious man, the store employees explained that the security camera inside the storage area had been broken for 2 weeks. They also stated that the man was a delivery worker who regularly brought goods to the store. The police split into 2 teams. One continued investigating the man's identity through store records, while the other searched the storage room for more evidence. It didn't take long for them to find Huang Nan's backpack left behind. Additionally, they found 2 packs of cigarettes, an open box of condoms with 3 left inside, a mobile phone, and a knife. Since the phone was locked with a password, it was sent back to the station for forensic analysis. Meanwhile, the team questioning the store staff gathered a few valuable leads. The man was identified as Chen Haoman, 53 years old, originally from Yongchuan. He started working at the convenience store in February 2011. Investigating his background through the resident registry, police learned that Chen and his family had moved to Chongqing earlier that year. His current address was found in temporary residence records. However, when the police visited his home, no one was there, suspecting that the family had fled. Officers questioned neighboring households about their whereabouts. Contrary to expectations, Chen Haoman and his wife had not gone into hiding, but had been staying at a psychiatric hospital to care for their young daughter. At the same time, the police received news that they had successfully unlocked Huang Nan's phone and recovered deleted data. This breakthrough provided crucial evidence for the investigation. Among the recovered files was a 15-minute video filmed by Huang Nan himself, showing him sexually assaulting a girl. In the video, he referred to her as Chen Zhaoqing. The footage clearly documented the assault and beating. Upon identifying the girl, the police confirmed she was Chen Haoman's daughter, the same person mentioned in prior complaints, that her father had submitted to the school, which were ignored. Furthermore, from August 18th to 20th, a girl named Han had been messaging Huang Nan, expressing romantic interest. She claimed to work at the convenience store and said she liked him at first sight. Despite knowing each other for only 3 days, they exchanged numerous explicit photos, including images of their private parts. Han had also sent provocative, seductive pictures, and she was the one who arranged to meet Huang Nan at the store's storage room. Police suspected that Chen Haoman might have posed as Ha En to lure Huang Nan. However, given that Chen was a 53-year-old man who had just moved from the countryside, it seemed unlikely that he could engage in such explicit conversations with the sophistication seen in the messages. Investigating the phone number further, the police discovered that the number actually belonged to Dan Wan, At that moment, another piece of information emerged. 12 days prior, Wang Nan had been summoned by the police following a sexual assault complaint. The complainant was none other than Chen Haoman. However, since Wang Nan was under 18 and there was no solid evidence apart from the complaint, he had been released on bail. The person who posted bail was identified as Dan Luan, Dan Wan's father. This revelation raised significant suspicions about Dan Luan's connection to Wang Nan. Piecing together the evidence, the police began to suspect that the case might involve two perpetrators, Dan Wan and Chen Haoman, sharing a common enemy in Wang Nan. They could have collaborated to plan and execute their revenge. The case clearly involved the complicated ties between Dan Luan, Dan Wan, and Wang Nan, as well as the deep anger of a father seeking justice for his daughter. Based on the evidence collected, the police obtained a warrant to search Chen Haoman's residence. Though surprised at first, Chen soon cooperated and allowed the officers to proceed. During the search of the storage area, police found key items believed to be connected to the case, including a spool of fishing line, a heavy cleaver, and a wooden chair marked with numerous cuts and stains. Forensic analysis revealed fingerprints of both Chen Haoman and Dan Wan on the cleaver. Consequently, both were brought to the police station for further questioning. Faced with the investigation, neither man resisted. At the station, they calmly answered every question, openly confessing to their involvement in Wang Nan's death. Chen Haoman explained that he had moved his family to Chongqing in hopes of finding a better life, believing a large city would offer a more civilized environment, far from the school violence his daughter Xiaoqing had previously faced. Unfortunately, the reality was disappointing. Instead of protection, Xiaoqing encountered even more severe bullying at her new school. One day, she came home visibly shaken, her appearance disheveled, with clear signs of having been mistreated. Xiaoqing shared with her parents that a classmate, Li Huangnan, had seriously harmed her and even threatened to publicly embarrass her further. This incident left Xiaoqing deeply traumatized, affecting her mental well-being. She became fearful of people around her, including her own family members. In response, Chen and his wife, heartbroken and desperate to help, decided to admit her to a specialized treatment facility. Feeling powerless after the school dismissed his complaints, and with no satisfactory outcome from legal channels, Chen's anger and frustration grew. It was during this time that Dan Wan reached out, proposing to join forces to confront Wang Nan. Dan Wan admitted that his reasons for cooperating with Chen Haoman went beyond seeking justice for Xiaoqing. He also carried his own personal grievances, particularly towards his father, Dan Luan, and his half-brother, Wang Nan. For him, this was a way to confront long-standing family conflicts. Dan Luan had been involved in an extramarital affair with Wang Nan's mother, which resulted in Wang Nan's birth the same year as Dan Wan. For 16 years, this secret remained hidden until Dan Wan's mother discovered the truth. In a moment of anger, she left home in her car, only to be tragically killed in an accident. Since then, Dan Wan had harbored deep resentment towards his father. The situation worsened when Dan Luan used his influence and money to transfer Wang Nan into Dan Wan's class. Their relationship grew increasingly tense. Wang Nan, unaware of his true parentage, was easily approached by Dan Wan. Befriending Wang Nan was part of Dan Wan's plan from the start. Initially, Dan Wan intended to set a trap, capturing incriminating photos of Wang Nan's reckless lifestyle and relationships, planning to expose both his behavior and his true identity as Dan Luan's illegitimate son. However, this plan was never carried out. Everything changed when Dan Wan learned about what had happened to Xiaoqing and how his father had bribed the school principal to cover it up. Fueled by anger, Dan Wan devised a far more severe plan. The idea was simple: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Together with Chen Haoman, they formed an alliance, united by their shared grievances against Wang Nan and Dan Luan. During the investigation, both Chen Haoman and Dan Wan admitted to planning Wang Nan's abduction. They chose the storage area of a convenience store as the location to ambush him, knowing the security cameras there had been out of order. Dan Wan was responsible for luring Huang Nan to the storage room, while Chen Haoman would incapacitate him and transport him to the crime scene. Dan Wan had selected a secluded riverside area for the act, having spent much of his childhood there, seeking solitude whenever punished by his father. Dan Wan knew the location well. Its tall grass provided natural cover, making it ideal for their plan. The river itself was also part of Chen Haoman's grim message, since Huang Nan had once threatened Chongqing with public humiliation. Chen wanted to symbolically expose him in return. To carry out his plan, Chen brought along a chair, a spool of fishing line, and other tools he had prepared. While Huang Nan was still unconscious, Chen restrained him and waited until he awoke. Chen confessed that he struck Huang Nan multiple times, aiming to make him experience the fear and pain his daughter had endured. The tools used in the incident were later recovered from the storage room. As for the more sensitive evidence, Chen admitted to burying it beneath a tree in front of Dan Wan's residence. Meanwhile, Dan Wan had used the excuse of going for a bicycle ride, but in reality, he went to the crime scene to witness the confrontation. For him, it was not only about vengeance for Chongqing, but also a reckoning with his own family's dark past. Dan Wan confessed that he had borrowed Chen Haoman's knife to destroy the pair of shoes Huang Nan was wearing. Those shoes, which he once liked, had been taken and used by Huang Nan, leaving him with no desire to keep them intact. This explained why his fingerprints were found on the knife. However, knowing that staying away for too long would arouse suspicion from his driver, Dan Huan left the scene early. Throughout the incident, it was Chen Haoman who carried out the physical assault, while Dan Huan remained outside, never directly participating. When they initiated their plan, both Chen Haoman and Dan Huan were fully aware of the consequences. They knew they would eventually be caught and held accountable. Rather than deny or attempt to flee, they chose to cooperate fully with the police, providing a complete confession. 2 weeks after their arrest, the trial began. The case drew widespread public attention. People condemned the inhumane nature of the crime, as well as the negligence of the school administration. Particularly criticized was the school principal, who had accepted bribes to cover up a student's misconduct. As a result, the principal was also placed under investigation for corruption. Though the public was deeply disturbed by Chen Haoman's actions, many sympathized with the pain he felt as a father. His desperate attempt to seek justice for his daughter was understandable on an emotional level. However, the law was clear taking another person's life was a grave offense. Consequently, Chen Haoman was sentenced to the harshest penalty. Upon hearing the verdict, Chen and his wife collapsed in tears. For Mrs. Meha, the suffering was immeasurable. She had lost her husband and now had to care for her ill daughter alone. As for Dan Wan, although he was a co-conspirator, his sentence was less severe. Being under 18 years old and not directly involved in the act of violence, he was sent to a juvenile rehabilitation center for 5 years. This case serves as a poignant reminder that there is no precise measure for the depth of a parent's love. A father's affection may not always be as openly expressed as a mother's, but it is constant and enduring. Chen Haoman's story reflected a tragic reality: his willingness to sacrifice everything, even his own future, in a desperate effort to protect his daughter. On the other hand, Dan Wan's path was shaped by years of emotional neglect and mistreatment from his father. That accumulated resentment eventually led him down a dark path, resulting in choices and actions that crossed moral boundaries. Every child deserves a chance at happiness. It is our hope that this case will serve as a profound moral lesson for all. Thank you for watching this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to stay updated on real-life true crime stories from around the world.